And we are started on the recording, and I'm going to be sharing my screen now. And I'll just move up to the first slide. And I'll minimize all the cameras. So I'm just looking at the one thing. So today we're going to be talking about setting quarterly goals. And when I sent this invitation out to folks via LinkedIn or other social media platforms, one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to pass on some value. So this is, my number one objective here is just leaving you with some tangible, valuable information that's going to help you or your organization set quarterly goals on a recurring basis. You can do this at an organizational level. You can do this at an individual level. I'll probably be spending most of my time at the organizational level, but I'll try and give you some examples of how you can bring this down to the individual contributor level as well. And so from an agenda perspective, we're going to be going through very quickly at a high level EOS, which is a methodology. It's an organizational operating system that I'm accredited to teach. It's something that I feel is a very, very powerful tool, but we're not going to get too deep into it. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of it. And then we're going to go through a quick interactive session. So if you're sitting at your computer, I'm going to get a quick poll up, and we'll ask 3 questions. I want to get your feedback on that. I want to talk about quarterly goal setting, or as we call them, rocks, and why we call them rocks. Then most of the session, I want to sort of share with you how we would facilitate a rock setting session, and then how we keep track of these things on a recurring basis. And really, that's about it. We'll probably be done the hour before we know it. If we had quite a bit fewer people here, we might have a little bit more interactivity. We'll see if there's some time at the end. Again, awesome to see all you guys, and really excited. I think we had 28 registered, and I think 22 or 23 was the number that I saw when I started this presentation. So just a quick overview on EOS. There's a book called Traction that was written by a gentleman by the name of Gino Wickman that details EOS in detail. But what it is it's an organizational operating system. It's a methodology for running your business, and you can run this particular methodology at the company level, and then you can bring it down to the departmental level as well. And it consists of 6 key areas within the business. So there's vision. Vision is the strategy component, and really all we want to do in the vision component is we want to make sure that everyone within the organization understands the strategy, the future state of the organization. So we ask 8 questions. The questions have to do with core values. The questions have to do with passion and purpose, your why, if you will, what your big, hairy, audacious goal is, in 10 years, but then bringing it right down to your 3-year picture, and then your 1-year plan, and then putting all of this information down on a basically a 2-page business plan, so that you can share it with your entire organization. Then we get into people. We want to make sure that you've got the right people in the right seats, primarily at the senior leadership team level. So we go through an exercise called the accountability chart. I'll be quickly referring to that in this presentation. And then we get into data. And data is essentially all the components of your business that are important, that would get you off the island if you were on an extended vacation. And so this is the analogy that we use. So let's say you're running a business and you're on vacation and you want to stay on vacation. What are the 3 to 5 metrics within your organization that you need to see every morning in order to make sure that you're on track or off track? And if you're off track, you got to rush back to the office. If you're on track, you can stay on vacation. So we get into kind of a balanced scorecard exercise. We spend a lot of time on the bottom part of this particular pie, and it has to do with operational execution. So, issues, resolving issues, ensuring that we execute on opportunities. We teach something called IDS, which is a methodology called, or that stands for Identify, Discuss, and Solve. And then we get into documenting all your key processes and teaching you a meeting cadence that is super effective. I did a webinar on the L10 meeting about 6 or 7 weeks ago, and it's available on the website if you're interested in that at all. So I want to start out real quick with 3 questions. And these are the questions that we typically ask when we're talking to organizations or departments. So, how would you rate your senior leadership team meetings or your departmental meetings in terms of productivity on a scale of 1 to 10? How clear is your vision for the company, and is it understood by everyone on a scale of 1 to 10? And then how effective is your organizational accountability on a scale of 1 to 10? And really, today's session is all about setting quarterly goals, and it has a lot to do with organizational accountability and individual accountability. So we'll be focusing in on that today. But those are the 3 questions that we typically ask when we embark upon either an EOS implementation or a rock setting session. And what I'd like you to do is just do an Alt tab right now and go to menti.com and use this code 789040. So I'll leave this up on the screen just for a second so you can switch to this, and then I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to go into a Menti presentation. So menti.com 789040. All right, I'm now sharing a new screen, and we're just going to go full screen here. And so this is an aggregate right now of 9 people of the group that's on the webinar answering this question on a scale of 1 to 10. And we'll just see how it shakes out when we're done here. Okay, this is a pretty good cross section. We'll stop here at 15. So you're averaging about 5.7 on meeting productivity, 5.5 on how clear your vision for the organization is, or the organization that you work for is to you, and then how accountable are people in your organization. And frankly, these are decent aggregates. Generally speaking, what we find is organizations would rate their senior leadership team meetings or meetings in general approximately 4 out of 10. Vision is typically 3 to 5 out of 10, and accountability is usually something that's quite low as well. So not bad, but essentially what we want to do with EOS and what we want to do with really good quarterly rock setting activities is take these particular measurements and bring them up to an 8 or a 9. 10 is kind of panacea. I don't know that you'll ever get there. If you can get there, that's fantastic. But we want to increase these 3 components when we're working with companies. So I'm just going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation here again. And thanks for participating in that. All right. So some other questions when we're setting quarterly goals. So how do we, whether we're at the individual level or whether we're at the corporate level, how do we know what's important? Is there consensus on what's important? Outside of pure quantitative measures, and I have a sales background. A lot of you that are on this Zoom call know me from my sales background, and really one of the things I love about sales is it's a numbers game, and really you're either on top of your number or you're not. But if you don't have the numbers, so let's say you're not in a sales scenario, or if you're in a sales scenario and you're in a startup where you're having to pivot all the time. I remember working at a startup where we didn't sell anything for 3 months. And it was very, very challenging. But basically, if you take a step down from that number, what are other things that need to be done, right? How can we manage to outcomes in today's COVID world? So can we execute the outcomes when we don't see our boss for months at a time? And this is what's happening right now. And so what we want to do, and is there consensus? So, you want to start off every quarter basically agreeing as a group on what's important, and then moving forward on executing on those things that are important. So I need to define something for you real quickly as we move into how we do it, how we facilitate it. We use the term issues. Issues has kind of a negative connotation, but here's the definition. An issue is an unresolved problem. So yeah, there's some negative components to it for sure, but it could also be an idea or an opportunity. So these three sort of challenges are in front of us on a pretty regular basis. And so what we've got to do is, as a group, as an organization, and even as individuals, is identify what the issues are that we need to deal with moving forward. So issues, that's a key definition point that I wanted to lay down as we move forward on how we facilitate this quarterly process. Next thing is we derive our quarterly priorities from two things. So there's company issues, and then there's functional issues. And when we talk about functional issues, we talk about your function within the organization. So if you are accountable for sales, if you're the VP of sales, your function is sales. If you're the VP of marketing, your function is marketing. If you are an individual contributor, your function is, basically being the CEO of your territory that's been defined by the organization that you're working for. So what we do when we set quarterly rocks is we derive our quarterly priorities from two things, and it's company and functional. And I need to walk you through a concept here real quick. It's unique and specific to EOS, but it's not required if we're going to be doing quarterly rock setting outside of this particular paradigm. But we have this concept in EOS called the accountability chart. And the accountability chart assumes that every organization is essentially the same. So you've got your primary functions, you've got your sales and marketing function, you've got your operations function, you've got your finance function. Now, yes, I know your organization might look a little different. So you might have sales and marketing separate, or operations might consist of research and development and delivery. Finance might have HR and IT in it. But essentially every single organization, no matter how big or small you are, has these functions. It could be as little as 3, it could be 5 or 6. And the concept here is that you need to have one person accountable for each one of these functions, because if you have multiple people accountable for these functions, no one's accountable. So we go through an exercise where we determine who's accountable for the various functions within your organization. And then every organization should have an integrator. An integrator, you might know the integrator in your organization as the COO or the president, but really titles don't matter. The integrator is the person within the organization that leads and manages accountability across the primary functions within the organization. And sometimes, especially in founder-led organizations, startups, I've got a lot of experience with startups, you'll have someone that's known as the visionary. So the visionary is the person, the big ideas person. Sometimes it's the founder of the organization. Sometimes it's your CTO. But basically, this is the person that has 20 ideas a day. 19 of them are kind of sketchy, but one of them could change the company's future, right? So some organizations have a great visionary integrator combination. Some more mature organizations actually just have an integrator, and that's okay. But what we do when we're setting quarterly rocks with companies is we make sure that everyone is aware of the function that they have within the organization and what the specific roles and responsibilities of each one of these functions are. Now, you may not have an accountability chart, so I've just thrown this up here to say, okay, listen, you do have an org chart though, and you do have people within your organization that has been fairly well defined and what they're responsible for. So, if you don't have an accountability chart, let's go with your org chart and let's make sure that when we're setting quarterly goals, that we do it at the functional level, but then also we do it at the corporate level. And I'll get into that in just a second. So I'm going to take a step back here. Why rocks? So Lem, you mentioned at the beginning of this a bunch of books. There are a bunch of books out there. I'll quote a couple. So Vern Harnish, he wrote a book called Scaling Up. And that was a fantastic methodology that I tried to implement when I was a CEO at 4Point, but it was just too big. But in this particular methodology, he spoke to, I think he borrows a little bit of this from Jim Collins in Good to Great, but he spoke to the most important things within your organization. And so, the old analogy, I suspect you've all heard it. If you've got a vase, and the vase represents time, and then you've got rocks, which is all the really important things. You've got sand, which is basically, the day-to-day activities. You've got, pebbles, and then you've got water. If you filled this particular vase with water first, and water signifies kind of all the interruptions in the day, you'd never have room for the rocks. But if you started with the rocks and then the pebbles and then the sand and then added the water, you'll have time for everything. So it's all about, that's the vernacular. It's just all about identifying what is the most important thing for you within this 90-day world that we're living in. Al Reese has a book called Focus. It's all about, execution and making sure that you don't bite off more than you can chew. So the analogy that we like to give is the sun has, a billion kilowatts of energy, but really, if you're out in the sun all day, the worst you'll get is a sunburn. But if you've got a laser with just a few kilowatts of energy, it can cut through diamond and steel. So, it's all about increasing focus. There was a Harris poll out about 10 years ago that basically described that a third of most employees within the organization don't really know what's important, what the corporate objectives are. A fifth don't care. And then 50% don't really understand what their role is within the organization, what their function is within the organization, and how that's going to help the company. So again, this is all about solving some of that kind of stuff. 90-day world just speaks to the fact that, as human beings, we probably have about a 90-day attention span before things start unraveling. And then a concept that you're going to see throughout this is just having things that are smart. So, specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound. So I'm going to get into the process that we do, and then just doing a quick time check here. Yeah, so we're in good shape. So the first thing that I want to mention is none of what we teach is rocket science. It's all been out there. But here's the thing: when we get into the business, when we're chasing a number, when we're chasing investors, when the board's, breathing down our neck, we have a tendency to just focus in on those types of things, and we need to take a step back. And some of my students, I teach part-time at Algonquin. Some of my students bring reports to me that are way better than maybe an executive or even myself would have written in the last year or two. And the reason for that is basically they're not in the weeds. They're able to look at things from a textbook perspective. And so everything I'm going to teach you here or impart to you here is just, it's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward. So if you want to maximize effectiveness on setting quarterly goals, there's a couple of things that I believe need to happen. It's not required 100% of the time, but I believe this needs to happen. So first of all, everyone needs to be on board, and I'm talking about the CEO on down. So if you have an organization where someone within the organization has been mandated to set quarterly goals, but the person above them isn't doing that, it's just not going to work, right? So if you've been asked, let's say, to attend this particular seminar or Zoom session by your boss, but your boss is, and you're going to start setting quarterly goals, but your boss isn't going to do the same, sometimes that's a bit of a challenge. Everyone needs to be on board. Once we set our rocks, we need to have weekly checkpoints. And the weekly checkpoints are not a really deep session, but basically what we're communicating is whether or not we're on track or off track on setting our rock. That's all. And then we need to, at the end of every quarter, we just need to go through an exercise where we identify what were the rocks, how'd we do? And we need to set the rocks for the next quarter. So we need to have quarterly postmortems. So from a foundational perspective, that is something that you need if you're going to embark upon this 90-day world journey. And then you also need to shift your mindset. So you need to shift it to on the business. You have to pretend that you are the board of directors for your company and or your territory. So if you're an individual contributor. So basically you need to take a step back and you need to act and think for the first step anyways, like you're on the board. And what would the board be saying? Not necessarily what would you be saying in this particular exercise. And then we'll get into what you would say in the next couple of steps. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to walk you through how I facilitate a quarterly rock setting session with an organization. And the use case here is going to be, let's say we've got about a 25 to 40 employee organization, and I'm in the room with the CEO, the COO, the CFO, VP sales, VP marketing, and perhaps maybe someone, a director of operations. So I'm in the room with them. And what I would do first is I would ask them to take 5 quiet minutes and write down all of the issues that they see, that are affecting them from delivering on whatever it is they want, whether it's a growth target, whether it's a customer count target, whatever it is. And I ask them to take 5 minutes and write them down. And as they write them down, they need to be looking at the issues from a corporate perspective. So we're not going to dive into your business just yet. So if you're VP sales, I'm not asking you about your issues necessarily at the sales level. I'm asking you as a company, what are the issues? And then we'll get into your stuff in just a little bit. And then, let's get everything on the table. And so it's kind of a brainstorming session. And typically I'm in a boardroom. Pre-COVID, I was in a boardroom. I do a lot of these things now over Zoom, and they're actually quite effective over Zoom because what I'm able to do is I've got a virtual whiteboard application. Plus, I'm also able to type quite a bit quicker and more effectively in a Google Sheet off to the side that I can share with the group afterwards. But the issues that might be derived in this particular use case might look something like this. And I'm just going to build this out slowly but surely. So pipeline's not big enough, numbers aren't there, it's feast or famine, deals are too Ottawa-centric, there's not enough medium-sized prospects, we need to create a remote-first workplace, strategic alliances are suffering, customer success, who fills the void, not enough case studies, what's the right dollar value for the top of the funnel, and forgive me, I'm just going to take a look at my chat. I had something comes through. Okay, nothing urgent. What's the right dollar value for the top of the funnel? Regional expansion is an issue. HR policies for work from home. Not enough upsell activity. You get the picture. So basically, these are the issues that an executive team would have up on the whiteboard. And the record, I think, was 65 when I was working with a company once. And the purpose of this exercise is to let everyone know that there's no way you're going to get all of these dealt with in the next 90 days. So you're going to have to pick. You're going to have to pick some things, right? And what's most important. And so what we then do is we go through a keep, killer, combine exercise. And so what you might see, if we go back to this slide here, is you might see a recurring theme. So there's a couple of recurring themes that have popped up in this particular scenario. There's a pipeline issue with this company. There seems to be some pain associated with the regional strategy. Customer success seems to be a bit of a gap, and COVID has popped up, and there's some work from home issues that are on the table. So what we've done now is we've identified 4 high-level issues: pipeline, regional strategy, customer success, and COVID. And what we're going to do is we're going to create some rocks associated with those particular issues within the organization. So that's, the first and the second step. The next thing that we do is we gain consensus and we make the rocks that we're creating smart. And I'm going to give you some examples in a little bit, but we want to make sure that they're not kind of loosey-goosey. There's got to be some specific time and some specific quantitative measures associated with these rocks. And so, we'll go through that exercise, and then we'll make sure that an executive owns these rocks. And this is where some of the accountability comes into play. The next step, so I just want to recap here. So I'm in the boardroom. I've got my senior leadership team. They've identified the corporate issues that are out there for the organization, and we've boiled it down to 4. We're going to build some rocks associated with that. And then what I want them to do now is I want them to go through their own function. And I want them to do that exact same 5 quiet-minute exercise and dig a little deeper on what the issues are for sales, marketing, operations, finance, you name it. And we'll go through an exercise where the individual then creates some quarterly goals for themselves. And then right around the table, everyone agrees that those are the right quarterly goals for them. Consensus is so important here because everyone's got to be buying in. And if people aren't buying in, then that's something that's got to be dealt with, and we want to make sure that they're smart. So going back to company rock, so here's what we've done in this particular scenario. The 4 main issues are pipeline, regional strategy, customer success, and COVID. And we've created these rocks. So for pipeline, the rock is by the end of the quarter, or actually as we exit the last 8 weeks of the quarter, we want a consistent 4-to-1 rolling pipeline top line. So 4-to-1 is just simply, you want to have 4 times as many opportunities in your pipeline as your target, right? So this is the rock that we've created. For regional strategy, the Toronto market analysis needs to be complete by the end of the first month of the quarter, with a go, no-go decision rendered by SLT. And then if it's a go, we want to have lease arrangements in negotiation by the second week of last month of the quarter. Customer success, we'll have a net promoter score in place and baseline established 6 weeks into the quarter. And then for COVID, we're going to have full financial analysis of lease exit terms with recommendations for the senior leadership team presented in 1 month. So these are 4, smart, rocks that we've created that are corporate. And we're going to assign each one of these rocks to an executive. So pipeline is probably going to be VP sales. Regional strategy could be the visionary. Customer success could be the director of operations. COVID could be HR. But, it really depends. Every organization is a little bit different. And then as we dive into the functions, we then create, rocks for the various functions. And so what I've done is I've given you some examples of some rocks that were created. I've anonymized this a little bit, but this is actually with an organization that I'm working with. And, what we've done here is we've identified 3 to 5 individual rocks, and we've made them smart. And we went through an exercise around the table. And by the way, this will take a couple hours. We've gone around the table and we've made sure that these particular objectives are smart. And in some scenarios down near the bottom, we haven't made them smart yet, but we've highlighted that they're not smart, and we're going to fix that in the next week because there's some follow-up that can be done after we do a rock setting session. But these are just examples of the function is the who, so marketing, BD, visionary, HR, integrator, finance, and then we've got these specific rocks that have been created. And what we want to do is we want to focus on less being more, and we want to make them smart. Now, on less more, our rule of thumb is 3 to 5 corporate rocks per quarter, 3 to 5 individual rocks per quarter. That's it. And we want to err actually on the 3 versus the 5. And so if you have more than 4 or 5, rocks for a 90-day period of time, I guarantee you, you'll be looking at those rocks with very little activity and very little traction at the end of the quarter. So just keep it very focused on 3 to 5 things and have consensus. Some individual examples, if you're an individual contributor, and I've lived this. So what happens if you're a senior sales executive in a new territory? Here's some examples of some individual rocks that you can create. So let's say you've inherited a territory. So, within the next 90 days, I'm going to have a complete transactional analysis of previous engagement across the territory. And I'm going to be presenting it to the SLT. And so, basically I'm going to do a deep dive on historical business, and I'm going to be presenting it back to the SLT. So that's an example of a smart rock. I'm going to have my target account list populated, complete with decision makers, emails, and phone numbers, and I'll have been connected with them by the end of the month, right? So that's in lieu of sales, especially when you're building a territory. Here's some things that will show to your organization that you're doing all the right things. And actually, this is going to help you too, moving forward. I'll have a 7-step reach out process architected. So what we mean by that is, let's say you want to nurture, or you want to take a year to go after a particular account. What are the 7 touch points? And what content is associated with those touch points? So are they white papers? Are they webinars? Whatever it might be. And then further to that, you're going to have steps 1 and 2 completed for 25% of your target account list by the end of 90 days. And then the 4th example is just 3 educational demonstrations per week. So again, if you're in a brand new territory, so basically you're doing 3 pitches a week. And it doesn't necessarily have to lead to business, but you're creating activity, and the activity is ultimately going to create your results. Now, setting rocks is one thing. Making sure that you follow up is another thing. And so what we do is we follow up every week, and it's real simple. Is your rock on track or off track? That's all we want to know. And if it's off track, we're going to move that down to an issue, and I'll walk you through how we do that. And we'll discuss that issue if we have time in that meeting. But we're basically just going to be very cut and dry. Are we on track or off track? And, what's really important here is everyone knows how important rocks are now. Your leadership team, your sales team, whatever. And so if someone's off track on a rock, that's important. And so people understand that, and people are rallying to try and help, try and remove obstacles, that type of thing. If you're articulating something in a meeting that people aren't really that sure whether it's important or not, you're going to get less support and assistance from that perspective. So really, it's a language. It's a language that will enable you when you're having a hallway discussion with the CEO, and the CEO says to you, you know what? I think we're going to, that product that you've been selling, I think we're going to use that as a loss leader, and we're going to give it away for free, but it'll be the thin edge of the wedge to sell all of our other products. Your reaction would be, well, that's going to affect my my rock, and you need to know that. You need to understand that. Now, the CEO may still do that, but if it's not going to affect the rock, maybe the CEO is going to be more inclined to do it. If it isn't going to affect the rock, they're going to be less inclined to do it, or they're going to ask a few more questions. So now I'm going to walk you through, and this is I did a full hour seminar on this about 6 weeks ago. It's on the website. I'm going to walk you through the level 10 meeting within EOS. Here's how we stay on top of rocks, and here's how we discuss a bunch of other things as well. So every single meeting that occurs, and it's a once a week meeting with the senior leadership team, is 90 minutes. And our goal is to, the reason why we call it level 10 is we want people around the table feeling that it's a 9 or a 10 out of 10 in terms of operational effectiveness. So we start out with good news, and all that is people, telling us a little bit about their personal and their business lives. Good news breaks the ice, gets people shifting gears, if you will, 5 minutes maximum. Then we go through a scorecard, a balanced scorecard review, and all we do there is we just identify those data points that we talked about at the beginning of this webinar that would get you off your vacation. We just identify if we're in good shape on those or not. And if we're not in good shape, we move that down to the issues list. Then we do a rock review, and we just go around the table and we make sure, we ask people, are you on track or off track on your rocks? And if you're off track on a rock, we move that down to the issues list. We get into people headlines. And so this is all the information that's sometimes is discussed in banter. So someone within your organization, lost a close family member, or they're pregnant, or a customer, has indicated that they're not happy with you. So customer and people headlines, we spend 5 minutes on that. Make sure that all of that information is communicated. We go through our to-dos, and to-dos are generated as we do issue a resolution. And issue resolution really is the next thing within this level 10 meeting, and it's the full 60 minutes. So this is a 90-minute meeting. It's a full 60 minutes of that meeting. And so as we IDS, if so-and-so is not going to make their rock, what we want to do is we want to dig a little deeper into why so-and-so isn't going to make their rock. And then coming out of that deep dive, you're going to have a couple of to-dos and perhaps some actions, right? And so what we want to do is we want to get everyone within the organization rallying around that really important thing. And that's what the to-do list the next week is all about, just making sure that to-dos get done. And then we conclude. And really that's a level 10 meeting. So that's how we stay focused and on track with regards to our rocks on a weekly basis. But then what's really important is end of quarter. End of quarter, you have to be very disciplined about this. We need to do a full rock review. And as an organization, as a sales team, as a senior leadership team, you want to be striving for 80% completion. And, spoiler alert, when I work with companies, generally speaking, the first quarter of this type of an implementation, you're probably looking at 30 to 40%. But you want to strive to 80%. And over a 2 to 3 quarter period, you want to get to that point. So you basically go around the table and you ask the person, we read out the rock, is your rock done or not done? And it's real simple. It's either done or it's not done. And then we go through a new exercise where we set new rocks for the quarter. So this is really important. You want to do this near the end of the quarter that's ending, or right at the beginning of the new quarter. And you want to be very, very disciplined about this. Generally speaking, this is about a 4-hour exercise at the company level. It might be a little less at the sort of department level, but generally speaking, that's how long it takes. Now, if you're less than 80%, there's one of 3 things happening. It's either a rock setting issue, so you may have overextended. People get better at setting rocks, at setting quarterly goals as time goes on. There might be an accountability issue, so you just might have someone within the organization that talks a big game, but they're just not able to execute, and that is going to be a symptom of something else that you're going to have to deal with at some point. But I'll tell you, people can't hide behind this process for very long if there's an accountability issue. Now, if there's a rock setting issue, that's a whole other discussion. And keep in mind, there's been consensus. As we've gone around and we've created these rocks, there's consensus. So the CEO has agreed to all the rocks 30 or 90 days before. And so the CEO may have agreed to a bunch of rocks for the VP of sales. And so they're in it with you, right, in that particular context. And so, we go through a bit of growing pain on the accountability front and on the rock setting front, or something happened. And something happened would be an M&A, COVID. Like there's some crazy things that happen that sometimes throw us off. But generally speaking, we try and avoid these types of, scenarios from an excuse perspective, if you will. But, you have the odd black swan event like we had 4 months ago, and stuff happens. Actually, you'd be surprised. There's quite a few companies I work with right now that are doing okay on rock completion now. even through COVID, surprisingly well. So that's generally, what occurs. And what I do, and what Bytown Ventures does, senior associates on the call as well. He's also my father. We work together on leadership development and EOS implementation. We'll do quarterly rock setting facilitation, and we'll do EOS implementation. And really that's the process. It's not rocket science, but it is a methodical discipline that needs to be followed. And what I'd like to do now at 10:46 is I'd just like to open up the floor to any questions. Feel free to ask away. And don't be shy. Lynn, you have a question.
I do. Hi, Scott. I have a question about how long it typically takes to develop that sense of discipline within a team to adhere to some of the guidelines that you've just shared with us. Because this is something that we'd like to implement in the organization that I work for. And I have a concern about people being disciplined enough to follow through with it.
Yeah, so you need buy-in, and essentially you need consensus initially across the board that we're all going to do this. The way we do this with EOS, if we're doing the EOS implementation, is we have something called the 90-minute meeting, where we make sure everyone on the senior leadership team is buying in, that you're going to be subscribing to this kind of a process. That said, even if everyone says that they're in, there's generally a quarter or two of pain associated with getting this running like a well-oiled machine. But within 6 to 9 months, if you're subscribing to this and you're buying into this system, I guarantee you, your conversations are gonna change. You're gonna be way more task-oriented when you do get together as a group. But generally, there's a couple of quarters of pain associated with it. But at the very least, people need to be coming into this. And this is why I mentioned at the beginning, you need really top down, right? So if you're a smaller organization, CEO down. If you're a large organization and you're doing this at the departmental level, it's got to be VP sales on down, VP marketing on down, CFO on down. And they need to have their own rocks as well. And when you get together as a group and you're reporting on how you did on your rocks at the end of the quarter, it's not just you, the individual contributor, that's reporting on how you did. Your CEO is there with you, and they're speaking to how they did. And it kind of brings you closer together. Everyone's in the same boat type thing. But I would say short answer is I'd say a couple of quarters, Lynn. And it does help if people have picked up that book or have watched a couple of videos on how effective this can be.
Okay, that's very reassuring that it could take a couple of quarters for everyone to sort of gel and get into it and really start seeing it becoming effective. Thank you. It's good to know.
No problem. Any other questions out there? Some great names here.
Scott, can I ask you or make a comment about consensus?
Yep.
It's a scary word to me because it implies a kind of groupthink when we know that individuals will have perspectives that may not be lining up, especially initially, with intention, right? So maybe they're more political, or maybe they have a grievance. Maybe they have a plan that they wanted to deploy and no one's listening, all that kind of stuff. I think you get the drift. So the kind of things that kind of remove the foundation of certainty from objectives. So is this dealt with? Are these things identified in the issue collection period? When you're sitting around trying to mastermind the complete list of issues and then to boil them down, do you find that people do reveal these areas of disagreement, even if it's carefully worded, and that they're able to get them addressed so that when you get to the end, you're actually really on the same page?
Yeah, and so one of my jobs, if I'm facilitating something like this, is moving to the danger, going to the danger. So if I sense through body language or through some inflection that there's a disconnect that's occurring, I try and bring that out. But there's two things that really help here. One is the accountability chart. So you need to get everyone agreeing that their function is their function, and do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity to do it? And so I'll give you an example. Sometimes you'll have VPs of sales and marketing, but really they lean towards marketing or they lean towards sales, one or the other. And what you need to do is you need to make sure that the person within that chair understands that there's two sides to that coin, and that they're fully going to go after both sides. And so through the accountability chart exercise, which can take, the accountability chart exercise can be as little as an hour. It can be, at my record so far, is 6 hours. So basically we get a lot of stuff out on the table, and we get people agreeing on what functions within the organization they're accountable for. And then once they agree and they're bought in, then the issues list and creating quarterly rocks is so much easier, right? The other thing is once you're in that rock setting session, you will have the inevitable, well, in order for me to make my rock, you need to do this. This is the person sitting across the boardroom table from them. And so those types of conversations are good though. Like, you want to have those as long as the door's closed and everyone's agreeing that you're going to leave the room as friends, no matter what's said, as long as it's professional. You want to have those conversations. And so if you have a sales person that's stepping up to the plate to a 4-to-1 pipeline ratio, but marketing isn't stepping up to the plate to creating leads for them, that conversation needs to happen. And then the marketing person maybe needs to step up, or vice versa. So those are the two things that really help. But when I do EOS implementation, the things that take the most time, generally speaking, are quarterly rock setting, and then a little bit of issue resolution as well. But if you don't go through these exercises, then sometimes it's a big group think that you're doing well, but you're not really moving the sticks forward.
Gotcha.
Anyone else? Is there anyone here, just looking at the list, is there anyone here that's implemented something like either EOS or has implemented, has been doing quarterly goal setting?
Yeah, Scott, it's Peter here. Yeah, we're 1 quarter into it, so it's all very new for us.
Yeah, good stuff. And bit of growing pains.
Oh yeah, I think we didn't hit the 80% on the first go around. That's for sure.
Yeah. And is there a method that you're using? Is there?
Well, we're following the traction general traction principles.
Okay.
A little loosely, but
Yeah.
That's basically what it's based on. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Peter.
Got it. It's Brent.
Brent, how are you?
Very good. You?
Good. You know what? You're not coming through super clear. I can't hear you very well.
Just going to get rid of my second.
Yeah, no, your mic isn't working. Sorry.
Yeah, no, can you hear me now?
There you are.
Yeah.
There you are.
So no, we implemented EOS about a year ago, as you very well know, but I'll say just from, it's a bit of a game changer in terms of.
Oh, now you're on mute. There you go.
Going through COVID, I would say the team was just prepared to deal with anything that was thrown at them.
I think it sounds like you have COVID.
And I would say, you mentioned that vacation thing. I currently sort of in the implementer visionary seat, but quickly moving out of that role because the leadership team is ready to take on running the business. So even with all this going on, and I'm not saying it's a testament to us, it's a testament to the methodology and how you implement it, how you, from the top down, getting people who are talking just buying in. People buy in when they see success, and I think that's a key component to this. So when they start seeing success, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels better. And I call it looking at your shoes time. Accountability, let's say you're 0 for 4 on your corporate rocks. No one, ideal scenario, no one's going to lose their job. But also people should be looking at their shoes and being a little sheepish about it, right? And they don't want that feeling again 90 days from now, right? And so it makes you a little bit better from a rock setting perspective, a little bit more realistic, but at the same time, there's an opportunity around the table. If someone is sandbagging their rocks, if they're just throwing things out that are not particularly hard or relevant, this is where the people in the room, again, the peers, can call that out behind closed doors and challenge the person to say, hey, you know what, creating 2 leads in the next 90 days is just not good enough, right? That's too easy. I need you to step up, that type of thing. All right. Anyone else? We're coming up on 11 o'clock. Listen, I'm just looking at the list. I want to catch up with all of you. So drop me a note. It was really good seeing you again. Pat, I could see you with your camera on. So nice to see you. Well, congratulations on your new role, by the way. And, there's some folks here on the line. When I did send out reminders, I did go BCC, but if you're astute, you can probably go into the meeting minder and see who was here. Sorry if I violated anyone's privacy, but at the same time, if we were doing this at a hotel, this would be an opportunity to network a little bit too. So like if you see anyone here that, might have similar problems, I don't think they'll mind if you reach out to them. Peter Oblinas, he's the CEO of Evidence Partners, which is a fast moving startup here in town. He's just implemented rocks. Feel free to reach out to him. Sorry, Peter, if I volunteered you for something. Reach out to anyone that you see here. And, I'm going to be doing something like this in about another 6 weeks that has to do with probably IDS, which is the Identify, Discuss, and Solve methodology. And I'm going to try and do these every 60 days or so. There's an L10 one on my website. Just want to add value and help you guys along as we all navigate COVID. And with that, I will bid you all adieu. I'm going to stop recording and thank you all for attending, and reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you, Scott.
Cheers.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That was awesome.
My pleasure.